You know that confident little fact you pull out whenever history comes up? The one that makes you sound like you actually paid attention in school? It never happened, not even close. Today we are not correcting the record. We are burning it down. 40 of history's most stubborn lies, exposed, dismantled, and left in ruins. Your version of history ends here. 1. Every mother on the planet has delivered the same verdict at some point. Finish your food and wait 30 minutes before getting in that water. Cramps, stomach chaos, internal disaster. Sports researchers have reviewed this claim repeatedly and dismissed it every single time. Mild discomfort during extreme exercise after an enormous meal is possible. Actual danger, never once documented. Generations of children spend entire summers sitting on the edge of perfectly good pools for a medical reason that never existed. Every mom was confidently, completely wrong. 2. To Christmas on December 25th. The birthday of Jesus. A date celebrated by billions of people every year with complete confidence. The Bible does not mention a date anywhere. Not once. The details it does provide, shepherds watching flocks in open fields at night, point far more convincingly towards spring than the middle of winter. So why December 25th? The early church made a calculated decision. When the Romans already had an enormously popular festival called Saturnalia, a week of feasting, celebration, and general chaos that wrapped up right around that date. Rather than fight a party the entire empire loved, the church placed a major holy day directly on top of it. The date was not a discovery. It was a strategic scheduling decision made over 1,000 years ago that the whole world has been honoring ever since. 3. Here is the one that has been comforting struggling students for generations. Even Einstein failed school. Even the greatest scientific mind in history could not pass basic mathematics as a child. So there is hope for everyone. Einstein did not fail mathematics. He had mastered advanced mathematical concepts before the age of 15. The myth traces back to a misreading of the Swiss school grading system, where 6 was the top mark and 1 was the lowest. The exact opposite of several other systems. Someone saw a 1 beside mathematics on his report card and announced to the world that he had failed. He had received the highest grade available. The most comforting story in all of education was built on a clerical misunderstanding and has been misleading people ever since. 4. Only 10% of the human brain is active at any given time. The other 90 just sits there dormant, packed with unrealized potential waiting for the right moment. Multiple major films were built entirely on this idea. Brain imaging has made it completely impossible to defend. Virtually every region of the brain has a documented function, and over the course of a full day, essentially all of it activates at some point. The figure likely came from misread research or from the fact that roughly 10% of brain cells are neurons, while the rest are support cells that are equally essential to everything. The number has no scientific basis and never had one. The myth was simply a better story than the truth. 5. The Caesar salad sounds ancient. Roman emperors, marble columns, and a recipe passed down through centuries. It was invented in 1924 in Tijuana by an Italian-Mexican restaurant owner named Cesar Cardini, who threw it together on a chaotic holiday weekend because his kitchen had almost nothing left in it. No Rome, no ancient recipe, no centuries of culinary tradition, just a man with nearly empty shelves and a restaurant full of hungry customers. It got named after one of history's most powerful rulers entirely by accident and spent the next 100 years convincing the world it was something far older than a last-minute improvisation. 6. That croissant, the one that arrives at breakfast as though it owns the entire morning. The pastry that is basically French identity in edible form. It is Austrian. The original version, a pastry called a Kipferl, has been an Austrian staple since at least the 13th century. Why the crescent shape was a deliberate symbol designed to celebrate a military victory over an empire whose flag featured that same crescent. An Austrian entrepreneur brought the concept to Paris in the 1830s. French bakers refined it, renamed it, and never once mentioned where the idea came from. France did not invent the croissant. France pulled off the greatest culinary theft in recorded history, and the whole world simply accepted it. 7. Fortune cookies. It placed at the end of every Chinese-American meal like a tiny edible tradition from the ancient East, invented in California, almost certainly created by a Japanese-American immigrant or a Chinese-American businessman in San Francisco in the early 1900s. In China itself, fortune cookies are essentially unknown. When they were introduced there after the 1990s, they were received as American novelty items, not rediscovered heritage. The most recognizable symbol of Chinese dining in America was made in California by someone China had never heard of. 8. George Washington and the Cherry Tree. A boy who could not tell a lie. He chopped it down, confessed immediately, and a nation's moral foundation was established in that single moment of honesty. The story was invented entirely by a biographer named Mason Locke Weems, who understood that an inspirational tale would sell considerably more books than a straightforward account. There was no cherry tree. There was no confession. There was a man who wrote fiction, labeled it biography, and accidentally created one of the most repeated stories in American history. 9. Medieval people never bathed. 1,000 years of accumulated grime, filth, and general foulness. Every film set in the Middle Ages has sold this image with complete confidence. Public bathhouses operated in towns and cities across Europe. Soap was manufactured and sold commercially. Religious teachings directly connected cleanliness with personal virtue. Manuscripts dedicated entirely to hygiene practices existed in considerable number. The unwashed medieval myth was largely a Victorian-era invention, a way for a later century to feel superior to the one that came before it. Medieval people were not feral. They just had a considerably colder idea of what a comfortable bath looked like. 10. Buried pirate treasure. A worn map with a marked location, a chest sitting underground on a remote island, waiting for the right adventurer to find it. This is the foundation of essentially every pirate story ever written, and it is almost entirely fiction. Pirates lived with enormous uncertainty and had no interest in long-term planning. Or any stolen goods were divided among the crew immediately and spent as quickly as possible at the nearest port. Captain Kidd did bury valuables before his capture, hoping to use them as bargaining leverage. He was such a rare exception that storytellers turned him into the universal rule. Most pirates had no buried treasure because they had already spent every last piece of it. 11. George Washington's wooden teeth. Washington did suffer serious dental problems throughout his life and wore dentures for most of his adult years. That part is accurate. The wooden part is completely false. His dentures were made from a combination of human teeth, animal teeth, ivory, and metal components. The wooden teeth myth likely developed because ivory stains and discolors over time and can develop a grain texture. The real story is not just wrong. It is wrong in concealing something considerably more uncomfortable sitting right underneath it. Right. A quarter of the way through and the myths only get stranger from here. Stay with this, because what is coming next includes a queen whose death was the subject of a massive smear campaign, a monk whose legend was built entirely on other people's incompetence, and a circumnavigation completed by someone who never gets the credit. 12. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. This has appeared in textbooks and been stated confidently by teachers and documentary presenters for decades. The wall stretches over 13,000 miles but is only 15 to 30 feet wide. From low Earth orbit, that width is roughly equivalent to a single strand of hair, viewed from a considerable distance away. Multiple astronauts specifically attempted to find it from space and could not. Several Chinese astronauts made the same attempt and reported the same result. The Great Wall is one of the most extraordinary construction achievements in the history of civilization. It is just not visible from space. Both of those things are equally and simultaneously true. 13. King Canute ordered the tide to stop. The arrogant king who sat on his throne at the water's edge and commanded the sea to obey him. The ultimate symbol of a ruler drunk on his own power. The story is being told completely backwards. Canute staged the entire event deliberately to prove a point to his own flattering courtiers who had been telling him his power was limitless. He sat down, commanded the tide, got soaked, turned to his court and said, "See, only God controls this." It was not arrogance. It was one of the most brilliantly staged lessons in humility that any ruler has ever performed, and history remembered it as the exact opposite. 14. Witches were burned at the stake in Salem. The image is so fixed in popular imagination that it feels like documented history. Nobody was burned at the stake in Salem. 19 people were executed by hanging. One man, Giles Corey, was subjected to an archaic legal procedure after refusing to enter a formal plea. The burning image comes from European trials, particularly in parts of Germany and Scotland, where that method was more commonly used in an entirely different time and place. Two separate historical events from two completely different continents got merged into one image and repeated so often that the wrong version became the only version most people have ever heard. 15. Wyatt Earp was a brave and honorable lawman, a true hero of the frontier. During his own lifetime, he was widely regarded as a fraudster, a horse thief, and a con artist. He did not become a celebrated hero until near the end of his life when he personally hired a writer to reconstruct his public image from scratch. The famous confrontation at the OK Corral lasted roughly 30 seconds and was so legally contested that Earp briefly faced charges for his own role in it. The legend of Wyatt Earp was a product he designed, funded, and marketed himself. Not a hero, a man who understood that controlling the story was worth more than the truth. 16. When the Dark Ages. 1,000 years of ignorance, brutality, and cultural collapse after the fall of Rome. History's most successful slander against an entire era. While parts of Western Europe faced genuine challenges, the Islamic world was experiencing a golden age of science, mathematics, and philosophy. Scholars in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba were advancing medicine, astronomy, and literature, while the so-called Dark Era was supposedly consuming everything. The term itself was invented by Renaissance thinkers who needed the period before them to seem inferior so that their own era would appear more enlightened by comparison. They named an age of darkness, and the name stuck for centuries. 17. Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern and burned Chicago to the ground. Simple, memorable, and perfectly designed to blame an animal for a human catastrophe. And the journalist who wrote the original story admitted decades later that he invented the cow entirely because it made better copy. The O'Leary family were poor Irish immigrants in a city with deep anti-immigrant sentiment. Convenient targets for a story that needed someone to blame. The actual cause of the Great Chicago Fire is unknown. The city was full of wooden buildings during a severe drought, and a single spark from almost anywhere could have started it. In blaming a cow was more entertaining than the truth, so that is what history kept. 18. Rasputin was said to be essentially impossible to bring down. The stories describe multiple dramatic failed attempts on his life before he finally passed away. Historians who examined the accounts carefully found a far less mystical explanation. Each attempt was poorly planned and badly carried out by people who had little idea what they were doing. The methods used were likely far less effective than the retellings claim, and the details grew considerably more dramatic with every passing year. Rasputin was not a supernatural figure beyond ordinary reach. He was a man whose opponents were simply spectacularly incompetent, and that incompetence accidentally turned him into one of history's most enduring legends. 19. The Titanic was advertised as unsinkable, and those two words are the entire foundation of the ship's legend, the ultimate symbol of human arrogance colliding with fate. White Star Line, the company that built and operated the vessel, never once used the word unsinkable in any advertisement, press release, or promotional material. Journalists invented it after the ship went down because the story needed a layer of irony to make it truly sell. Unsinkable ship sinks is a far more compelling headline than large vessel meets unfortunate accident. The most famous fact about the Titanic was a piece of fiction invented by the press to shift more newspapers, and it worked so well that the world is still repeating it more than 100 years later. 20. The Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk and were immediately celebrated as American heroes who had changed the world forever. The opposite happened. Their achievement was met with widespread skepticism, dismissal, and near total indifference. Newspapers ignored the story. The United States government showed no meaningful interest. The brothers spent years being treated as either frauds or curiosities by their own country. It was only after they took their flying machine to Europe and demonstrated it to enormous crowds and massive acclaim that America finally turned around and decided they were national heroes after all. Their own country was the last place to take them seriously. 21. Ferdinand Magellan led the first circumnavigation of the globe. He is given the credit, the name recognition, and the place in every history textbook. He never finished the journey. Magellan lost his life in the Philippines roughly halfway through the expedition after involving himself in a local conflict that had nothing to do with the voyage. The circumnavigation was completed by 18 surviving crew members, led by a navigator named Juan Sebastian Elcano, who got the last ship home across waters nobody had ever charted. Magellan received the fame. Elcano and his crew did the second half of the actual work, and history largely forgot them. We are exactly halfway. The next 20 go further. A composer wrongly accused of the worst kind of betrayal, a discovery that happened nothing like the famous story, and a myth so deeply wired into everyday life that billions of people still act on it at the dinner table. Keep watching. 22. Van Gogh and the ear. The story everyone knows is that in a moment of personal crisis, he removed his entire ear and handed it to a woman nearby. He cut off the lower portion of the earlobe. That is it. Not the whole ear, not even close to the whole ear. A small piece of the lower lobe. History decided that a partial injury was not dramatic enough for the legend of a tortured genius and quietly upgraded it to something far more extreme. The real version is still deeply sad. It just does not match the theatrical image that got permanently attached to his name. 23. The Viking funeral. A great chief laid to rest in his long ship, pushed out to sea and set ablaze by a single flaming arrow fired from the shore. It is the most cinematic send-off in all of history. It is also a near impossible logistical event. The arrow would need to travel a significant distance, hit a moving target on open water, and successfully ignite wet timber in wind and sea spray. Long ships were extraordinarily valuable and not casually destroyed. Viking burial rituals did involve fire, but almost always on land where the outcome could actually be controlled. The version that appears in every film has never been confirmed as a genuine widespread practice. 24. One of the thumbs down gesture in a Roman arena meant death for a defeated gladiator. This image is embedded so deeply in popular culture, it feels like ancient fact. Most historical evidence suggests thumbs down actually signaled mercy, representing the sheathing of a sword. The signal for death was more likely a raised or extended thumb, mimicking the act of drawing a blade. Every thumbs down given online to dislike something is using the gesture that meant spare him, not finish him. Was 2,000 years of Roman history got quietly reversed, and nobody noticed until long after the image had become permanent. 25. Ninjas wore all black. The silent infiltrator in a sleek dark uniform, vanishing into shadows. Pure black clothing against a dark sky or a moonlit landscape actually creates a visible silhouette. It stands out more than it conceals. Actual shinobi were masters of blending in who dressed as farmers, monks, merchants, and/or servants. Anything that allowed movement through a crowd unnoticed. For night operations, the colors used were deep navy or dark reddish-brown, which genuinely dissolve into darkness. The all-black look came from Japanese kabuki theater, where stagehands wore black to signal to the audience that they were invisible. The iconic ninja uniform was a theatrical convention for a backstage crew that history decided was a warrior's disguise. 26. Florence Nightingale was a gentle, a nurturing figure who walked the wards of military hospitals with a lamp, comforting the wounded with kindness and care. This portrait, while not entirely false, obscures what she actually was. Nightingale was a brilliant statistician who used mortality data to expose the conditions that were causing soldiers to lose their lives, not from injuries but from entirely preventable illness. Once she developed groundbreaking visual charts to present her findings to government officials who would not have sat through dense written reports. She did not save lives primarily through compassion. She saved them by making powerful people look at numbers they could not ignore. The lamp was real. The full picture was considerably sharper. 27. Catherine the Great of Russia has one of the most unfair reputations in the history of powerful women. When the scandalous story most people have heard about the circumstances of her passing is a complete fabrication, a malicious rumor invented by her political rivals who wanted to tarnish the legacy of a woman who had consistently outmaneuvered them. She passed away from natural causes at the age of 67. What her enemies could not take from her in life, they tried to take with gossip after it. She expanded an empire, modernized a nation, corresponded with the great thinkers of her era, and shaped the course of Russian history. The rumor has nothing to do with who she actually was. It was a smear campaign dressed up as a story, and far too many people have been repeating it ever since. 28. Spaghetti and meatballs is authentically Italian. Walk into any restaurant in Italy and try to order it. The dish does not exist there in any traditional sense. Italian immigrants to America adapted their recipes to local ingredients, larger portion sizes, and different cuts of meat, creating something entirely new that had never been served in the country their cooking supposedly came from. The dish became wildly popular, was immediately identified as the authentic taste of Italy, and is now more internationally famous than most food that actually originates there. A meal invented in America convinced the entire world it was Italian, and Italy never quite got around to correcting anyone. 29. Marco Polo brought pasta back to Italy from China after witnessing noodle making on his travels. It is a neat culinary story that connects East and West through a single adventurous traveler. Various forms of pasta had existed in Italy and across the Mediterranean for centuries before Polo ever left for Asia. He may well have encountered different styles of noodles in China, but the idea that he introduced pasta to Italy is roughly equivalent to arriving somewhere with snow and presenting it as a discovery. The story attached itself to his name because it was a satisfying explanation. The actual history of pasta in Italy needed no outside help. 30. Walt Disney's body was cryogenically frozen after his passing and is stored somewhere beneath the Disneyland park. It preserved and waiting for future technology to revive him. Disney was cremated in December 1966. There is no frozen body. There is no underground chamber. The rumor appears to have started because the first widely publicized cryonic preservation in history happened just 1 month after Disney passed away, and someone connected the two events with no evidence whatsoever. The story spread because it was exactly the kind of thing people wanted to believe about a man who built a kingdom around the idea that imagination could overcome any limit. 31. Diamonds are formed from compressed coal. This sounds entirely reasonable and has been repeated so often it became accepted as fact. Most diamonds formed deep in the Earth's mantle billions of years ago, long before land plants existed, which means coal, which comes from compressed ancient plant matter, much was not yet available. The carbon that forms diamonds comes from other sources entirely, including ancient marine organisms and carbon carried deep into the Earth by tectonic movement. The coal to diamond story is a piece of satisfying logic that the actual geology of the planet does not support at all. 32. Antonio Salieri poisoned Mozart out of professional jealousy and spent the rest of his life consumed by guilt over what he had done. This story was dramatized so powerfully in a famous film that it became the version most people believe. Salieri was a respected, successful, and genuinely celebrated composer during his own lifetime. He and Mozart were professional rivals in the way that any two prominent composers working in the same city at the same time would be. There is no credible historical evidence of murderous envy. The poisoning story is a rumor that Salieri himself specifically denied near the end of his life. A man's entire legacy was replaced by a fictional version of it, and the fictional version has proven almost impossible to dislodge. Right, 8 left. These are the ones that reach into everyday life, fairy tales, and the kitchen. Do not move. 33. The Wilhelm scream, the distinctive yelping sound effect used in hundreds of films and television programs, has a widely repeated origin story crediting a specific actor from a 1951 recording session. More recent research has cast serious doubt on this and pointed toward a different session and a different performer entirely. The true origin of the most famous sound in cinema history remains genuinely unresolved. The confident version that everyone repeats is likely incorrect, which makes the Wilhelm scream, a sound used to fill dramatic moments with certainty, one of the most appropriately uncertain things in all of film history. 34. The 5-second rule. When a food dropped on the floor is safe to eat if retrieved within 5 seconds because bacteria need time to transfer. Bacteria do not operate on a countdown. Transfer happens essentially on contact depending on the surface, the food, and whatever is on that floor at that particular moment. Food scientists have studied this directly and confirmed it has no basis in microbiology whatsoever. It is a universally beloved piece of self-justification with no scientific foundation, and at this point, almost everyone alive has used it at least once. 35. Pirates sounded the way they do in every film. The rolling accent, the distinctive RR, the whole theatrical delivery. That voice came almost entirely from one man. An actor named Robert Newton played Long John Silver in a 1950 film adaptation of Treasure Island and performed the role in a thick West Country English accent because he happened to be from that part of England. The accent caught on, got imitated, and became the definitive sound of piracy in global popular culture. Real pirates came from dozens of different countries and spoke in dozens of different languages and accents. The R was one man's regional dialect. A single film performance became the voice of an entire historical era. 36. Frankenstein is the name of the monster, the lurching figure in every Halloween costume. In Mary Shelley's original novel, Frankenstein is the name of the scientist, Victor Frankenstein, who creates the creature. The creature itself has no name throughout the entire book and is referred to as the creature, the monster, the demon, and the wretch at various points. The confusion likely developed because the monster is the more visually memorable character, and Frankenstein is a more dramatic name than any of those alternatives. The error has been repeated across so many adaptations that the wrong version now feels more natural than the original. The monster never had a name. The scientist did. 37. Carrots improve eyesight. Eating enough of them sharpens vision and may eventually remove the need for glasses. Or carrots contain beta-carotene, which converts to vitamin A, and a vitamin A deficiency can cause vision problems. That part is accurate. But consuming carrots beyond what is needed for normal vitamin A levels does nothing additional for the eyesight of someone who is already healthy. The widespread belief that carrots actively improve vision was partly a deliberate piece of wartime misinformation. British intelligence promoted the idea during the Second World War to explain why their pilots were performing so effectively at night, when the actual reason was a newly developed radar system they needed to keep hidden from the enemy. The carrot story was cover. It worked so well it outlasted the war by decades. 38. The Great Fire of London in 1666 destroyed the city and killed thousands of people in one of history's most devastating urban disasters. The official recorded death toll from the fire is 6 people. 6. For a fire that burned for 4 days and destroyed thousands of buildings across a densely populated city, that number is so remarkably low that historians still debate whether many deaths went unrecorded, particularly among those whose lives were less likely to be formally documented. The fire was catastrophic in terms of property and displacement. As a loss of human life, it was far more contained than anyone ever mentions. 39. Cinderella's iconic slippers were made of glass, fragile, impractical, and structurally absurd as footwear, but glass nonetheless, and one of the most recognizable images in all of fairy tale history. The glass slipper appears to have entered the story through a mistranslation of an earlier French version of the tale in which the slippers were made of vair, a type of rare, luxurious fur used in medieval garments. Vair and vair, the French word for glass, are similar enough that at some point one replaced the other, and nobody caught it before the story went everywhere. The most famous shoes in fiction may have been a translation error that slipped through and never got corrected. 40. Joan of Arc was a military genius who led charges in shining armor and turned the tide of war through tactical brilliance on the battlefield. Her actual role was something different and arguably more powerful. She was a living symbol. Her presence on the field shifted the confidence of entire armies, shattering the morale of one side and giving the other a conviction that no military strategy alone could have produced. Commanders around her made the tactical decisions. She provided something that cannot be manufactured: the unshakable belief among her own side that they were fighting with divine backing. She was not a general. She was the reason the generals had an army willing to fight. And here is the one that explains every entry before it: the idea that we actually know what happened in history. History is not an objective recording of events. It is a story shaped by whoever was doing the writing, filtered through the priorities of their time, simplified for audiences, and repeated until the simplified version became the only version. The Titanic was labeled unsinkable to make a better headline. Van Gogh's ear was upgraded to make a better legend. Hannah Canute was remembered as arrogant because humility makes a less memorable punchline. Every era edits the past to serve the present. The history that feels most certain is often the version that was most useful to someone at some point, not necessarily the one closest to what actually happened. The most important habit when looking at any historical claim is not to memorize it. It is to ask who told this story, when they told it, and what they needed it to mean. And there you have it, with 40 historical myths completely dismantled. Now go to the comments and be honest. Which one of these did you argue about with complete confidence, only to find out just now that you had it entirely wrong? Drop it below and subscribe because we are nowhere near done.